Well, welcome to another edition of Ozarks Voices Oral History Project. My name is Tom Peters. I'm the Dean of Library Services. Today is Tuesday, March 10th of 2015. Our guest today is Ken Meyer, who is the co-founder of Meyer Communications.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
sir.
Yes, and the chief picker at Meyer Farms.
That's a good description.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Well, let's start with an easy question. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Hoberg, Missouri on the 14th of October. That's Eisenhower's birthday, by the way, of 1927.
1927.
Yeah.
And Hoberg is a few miles southwest of Mount Vernon.
Right, about 3 miles.
In Lawrence
County.
Lawrence County. So you grew up on a farm?
Absolutely.
Okay. And what type of farm was it?
It was a dairy farm.
Okay.
My dad liked Jersey cattle, so we had rich milk cows.
A lot of cream.
A lot of cream.
High fat content on the.
Very high.
Yeah. Now so I imagine you've milked quite a few cows in your.
Well, for 4 people, which was Dad, Mom, my brother, and I, because we did not have a milking machine in those days,
Mm-hmm.
why, we usually had from 16 to 20 cows.
Mm-hmm. You milk them twice a day?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No vacations?
No. Once in a while, my brother and I got a vacation. We got to go visit Grandpa and Grandma Meyer, who lived east of Mount Vernon,
Okay.
a whole 12 miles away. But that was a vacation.
That was a big trip, huh, to go the
Yeah.
12 miles. So you grew up during the Depression years.
Yes.
What do you remember from those times? Times were tough?
Well, you know, I can't say that because we always had plenty to eat. We didn't take any trips, but we always got to go to the movies and do the things that were going on in a farm community in those days. So we didn't have the fanciest cars around or anything, but we were very comfortable.
Yeah.
And our family always had a good time.
Yeah. Okay. And where'd you go to school?
Well, grade school, the first 8 years was Rydell, District number 70, which was located a half mile north of Freistadt.
Okay.
Freistadt, which was a prominent Lutheran community, had a parochial school there, still does, very fine school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was consisted of the Meyer kids who were not Lutheran, plus those who had been kicked out of or who didn't like the Lutheran school. So I tell people I was raised with delinquents, but they weren't. They were great people.
Uh-huh. How far away was school from the farmhouse?
2.5 miles.
Okay.
Got to walk it twice a day.
You walked it twice a day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did Southwest Missouri suffer a significant drought during the 30s?
Yes, there was a very, very severe drought, and I know Dad had problems raising enough hay, and I can remember we would go west to haul back bales of hay, and that don't remember exactly, but it was near the middle of the 30s.
Mm-hmm. So, and when how did you sell your milk? To whom did you sell your milk?
Well, we sold it to the MFA plant here in Springfield. It was Producers Creamery.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest plant, as I remember it, milk handling plant in the United States was in Mount Vernon, the Carnation plant.
Mm-hmm.
Dad and my uncle were involved with the Missouri Farmers Association, the MFA. They were starting to process milk here in Springfield. it was called Producer's Creamery.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big carnation plant. Dad and my uncle, in fact, both my uncles were very interested and participated in the development of Missouri Farmers Association. And that's why they shipped their milk to Springfield. There was a gentleman in Lawrence County that picked up milk every morning to bring to Springfield for the MFA.
How would he bring it in those, I'm gonna call maybe 10-gallon?
Yeah, there were
canisters?
10-gallon cans, and I don't remember any of them ever being cooled or refrigerated, but he picked them up early morning and they got to Springfield. You know, in those days it probably was an hour drive because the roads were 2 lanes, etc.
Yeah. The carnation plant was the biggest in the world at its time?
That's what the Chamber of Commerce down there used to say. They handled a lot of milk, and they picked up milk from all over this southern part of the state to bring in there, and they condensed it and canned it there.
So it was all canned milk at the carnation plant, okay. Did you grow anything else on the farm? Crops or animals, livestock?
Well, of course, we had a certain amount of animals, you know. He always had a small pig lot, and my mother was a premier gardener. That caused a lot of work for her sons and that, but basically the income came principally from the milk. There was always crops left over, like he raised corn, wheat, and barley, which was sold and distributed after what we needed for the cows.
Okay,
And we did a lot of hay.
a lot of hay, okay. So you'd bale hay on a hot summer day and,
You know, in those days, more of it was stacked, and both in the barns and outside. Not as much baling with the, in our area down there, the farms were small, they weren't gigantic. Dad had 160 acres, and most of them around there were from 120 to 200 acres and that, which were for these small dairy farms.
So after 8th grade, then you went on to high school?
Went to high school in Mount Vernon. Became a mountaineer.
What were your favorite subjects?
Well, I guess business, you know, accounting and typing. The only thing I was champion in high school was typing. I was the fastest typer in school.
Really?
Which is, when I look at how I do it today, it's kind of a shock.
Yeah. Did you take a course in typing? Or how
Oh
did you
yeah,
learn to-
I took 2 courses in typing.
Yeah. I took a course in typing when I was in junior high school.
Is it?
Glad I have it now.
When you're a winner, why it's fun.
Yeah. So you were in high school during the war years.
41 to 45.
Uh-huh. What do you remember about those war years and being in high school and rationing and?
Yeah, there was rationing and cigarettes, cigars. My grandfather was terribly upset with Roosevelt for rationing cigars and things like that. But also, Mount Vernon had merged with Stott City, a little town west of them. And there was a smaller school out near Heatonville. And the merger was done in late 40, early 41, and they had not been able to buy additional buses because those were several miles away. And so it wound up that 2 of the routes that picked us up, we were 5 miles from Mount Vernon, were dual routes. And it just so happened that the Meyer household was the second stop on the first bus. So we got to milk early, and we got to come home early which prevented me from playing football, which I wanted to.
You like to
But
play football?
the bus left at 3 o'clock, and football practice was later, so that's how I probably saved some aches and pains today.
You're still able to walk today because you
Yeah.
didn't play football.
You're right.
Any other sports or music or anything when you were in high school?
I don't know. I had the fortune of living with a professional museum. Jane was a very fine musician. Her mother was a professional musician. But I don't know, a C from a whatever else. But I did play softball and baseball. And so those were great sports. And then when I got out of college, golf. I don't know what that I mean. I know I wasn't good at golf, but it's been a lot of fun, and I still play today.
You enjoyed golf?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to college at SMS?
SMS.
Okay.
Started in 1945, and the war was over in August, and I thought I was home free. I was up here in Springfield, and went to business college during the summertime because I'd gotten a $150 scholarship. It was great at Drawings Business College, and then that fall, after the war ended in August, I enrolled at SMS. And there was about 900 people there, 100 men, and about 800 girls. And I can remember Coach Blair tried to get me to come out for football. Anybody could walk, and was a fair size. I was fairly good size even in those days. So, but I didn't make that, and went off and got drafted in March of '46, which was the next to the last World War II draft. So by 30 days, I became a World War II veteran, because that's what they counted us. And,
So you were drafted. Where did you have to report for duty?
to Leavenworth, Kansas. Went to Amarillo for basic training, got shipped to Larry Field. Then they put 1,000 of us on a boat with Arctic gear, and off we went. And the third day it got hot as the devil, and the fourth day we saw palm trees, and we were pulled into Pearl Harbor. At that time, they still had a lot of the old ships from '41 that they had cleaned out the entryway and that, and they pulled 14 of us off. While we waited most of the day in the receiving room their area, all of us learned we had been in college, and we later learned that they were downsizing the 7th Air Force, so we wound up at the 7th Air Force, and what magnificent duty. A free college education and that nice weather over there to spend 13 months with was great.
So you never had to use your Arctic gear, huh?
No. Had a devil of a time getting rid of it.
Yeah. How many months were you there? How many years?
I was 4 months in basic training and in Lowry, but 13 months in Honolulu.
Okay.
Hickam Field.
Okay. What was your specialty?
We're in the accounting department.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't do much accounting. Our particular captain insisted we stay till 1 o'clock, which is when the Pentagon closed in Washington in those days. Okay. And the statistical review unit, which is what we were, reported to Washington, not to headquarters. So that's why he was so insistent that we work till they went home.
Yeah. Did you get any passes on the weekend, or you're in Hawaii? So.
Oh yeah, yeah. We got passes and got to visit the other islands. So it was prime duty.
Yeah.
All of the guys that I were my aides that got caught in that tail end of the draft always wondered who I knew.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know the draft board committee chief in Lawrence County, so luck happens.
Yeah. So where and when did you meet your wife?
I met Jane in 1958 on a blind date.
Blind date?
Yeah.
Okay.
A good.
Who set it up? Your friend or her
no,
friend?
a former roommate of mine
Uh-huh.
who was in Jeff City, and he had become chairman, not president, of the junior chamber up there, and they were having a big dance, and he invited me up. I enjoyed going to MU football games, still do.
Uh-huh.
And so he invited me up on a Friday night for a big JC dance. And I don't know about the junior chamber today. I don't guess they exist, but they have a long party. We had a long date, and I didn't get drunk or obnoxious, so I guess she agreed to another date.
Yeah. Was it love at first sight, or?
I liked her,
Yeah.
and I guess she did. It was over a year before we finally got married.
Yeah. Well, good.
She was a most unusual human being, the most unusual one I ever met, and one of the smartest.
Mm-hmm.
She was the one that developed KTXR,
Mm-hmm.
and so gives you some idea of a relatively new industry at the time. We started in the 60s on it and that. And
Mm-hmm.
Jane had been a newspaper woman. Her daddy had a small town newspaper, a couple of them, but
Where did she grow up?
in Butler.
Butler. Okay.
Her grade school and that was done in Jeff City. He was a industrial committee commissioner. It had been formed, and Governor Blair had appointed him to it. They had to have one Republican, and he was that. So she grew up there, and then they moved back to, at the end of his term, to Butler, and she went to high school there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It was her idea to get into the media and communications business? Or?
She was always interested in the newspaper business,
Uh-huh.
but she couldn't understand why I wanted to get into the radio business.
Mm-hmm.
And we got in it early. Stereo FM was authorized June 1st there, and we got on the 13th, so we were the second stereo FM station in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
There was one in St. Louis that beat us by 13 days, but once she got in it, her news instincts and entertainment instincts, she was a very fine organist and that, why, got her interested, and so she quit teaching and tried to raise our daughter, and who was ill all the time, and so was custodial care in that, and she took up the radio station and did a heck of a job.
Mm-hmm.
Many firsts in the state, and yeah.
Did it grow from there? Then did you acquire other radio stations and some
Yeah.
TV stations?
Yeah, we acquired Fulton, Missouri, and then I put together the TV station, and it went on the air in 1968.
Okay.
And then we bought other stations around.
Mm-hmm. Did you get involved in print media at all?
Been in some of these small publications. We had I'm trying to think of the name of it. We had a small one that was primarily a business type publication, and but we didn't do very well with it. We soon got out of it. the guy who had sold us on the idea had a chance to go to Florida with a highly financed operation, so he went south, and we closed it down. But basically, it's been radio, television, and production. At one time, we did a lot of production work for radio and television.
Back to the farm now. So, farm's still in the family, correct?
Right,
This is Meyer Farm's wine.
right.
So tell me, let's back up. Your relatives came over from Alsace-Lorraine?
Yes,
Okay.
part of it.
Uh-huh.
Grandpa Meyer came from what is, as close as we can tell, it was Austria. The town no longer exists, but it was in the area where Austria and Germany came together. As I understand, that border has fluctuated from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the Rademeyers came from the Alsace-Lorraine area.
Uh-huh. Were they farmers?
All farmers.
Uh-huh.
Grandma Rademeyer came from Berlin. So we had Berlin, Austria, and the Alsace.
Mm-hmm. What brought them to America?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea.
What brought them to Missouri?
That is interesting because we do know that the Meyer family, when it was coming over, diphtheria broke out on the boat, and there were 7 of them on the boat plus mother. Father was already here, and 5 of them died en route, and 2 boys made it to Illinois, and I guess single men like that were looked upon as who's going to support them. They were both young, and so of course they got one relative who was living in Missouri. It was a cousin, and so they came to Missouri then.
Mm-hmm. And so, were there grapes in your family history, or how did you get involved in grapes?
My grandfather Rademeyer was a mule trader in World War I, and I don't know if you've ever written General Pershing's book on how we won the war, something like that. I can't think of the exact name of it, but he was a mule trader there and did very well. He wound up with a section of land down there, 640 acres. And so he, one of his son-in-laws always said he was too lazy to go to work, so he gave 160 to one of his sons, and another 160 acres, one of his son-in-laws, and another 160 acres to my father and mother, and then he kept 160 for himself and sold 160 to a cousin. And he wasn't in the dairy business. He had a couple of 3 cows for his own use, but he did a lot of things, including in the early 20s planting grapes, right during Prohibition. And as I understand it, there was a guy in Monette that made whiskey, and a fellow in Freistadt that was a big beer maker, and he was over at Hoberg making wine. And I always get amused. Mother always said that the whole family was off after him, said, "You're going to get shipped back to Germany." Said, "It's against the law." And he said, "It's not against the law. They can't put me in jail. They wrote the damn thing in English, and I can't read English." And he couldn't. He could only read German.
Now, was German spoken in your household when you were growing up?
Up until World War II started.
Uh-huh.
and it was quickly abandoned.
Okay.
They had, as I recall, they had one German service per month at both the Lutheran Church and Freistadt. They might have had two, but there was at least one. And then the Evangelical and Reformed Church, which was located near to Hoberg, why they had once a month. I remember that. We were members of that church.
Okay. So, what led you to get into the wine business?
Well, Lawrence County is the biggest cattle county in the state of Missouri. And Missouri is second in the nation after Texas in cattle now. The dairy cows have gone to beef.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a cousin who was a judge down in Lawrence County, was always complaining at Christmas time about the things he disliked the most in court was cases on cattle rustling and divorce. And there was a lot of that going on, and I just thought, being 35 miles away, it's going to stay hard. And I had a brother-in-law down in Marionville that was robbed twice when the mom died in '89, and when the land was transferred to me and my sisters, and I promptly bought out my sisters. So I decided to follow Grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
and I planted grapes. Jim Baker was the one who I developed a lot of my information from. He took me down to Fountain Grove a couple of times, and I knew a gentleman up in town here in Springfield named Duff McCoy, who had, when he died 4 years ago, he was 93, 94, and had sold beer and whiskey for 50, 60 some years. He was a 16-year-old kid during Prohibition that delivered spirits from Walgreens downtown. That was evidently an operation in the back of the manager, is how he put it.
Uh-huh.
But he had done that, and he was a great help in setting it up. But unfortunately, he died the year that we had first developed Eddie juice, Eddie wine. So
Uh-huh.
it didn't wind up handling us.
So over at Mountain Grove, did you talk to the people at the Fruit and Experiment Station? Did they help
Yeah,
you
I've
out
been
at all?
down there several times. That's quite an operation.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of sad that that thing was moved to Columbia for MU because I'll have local pride here. They do so much better job than they do
Mm-hmm.
up north.
Yeah.
Don't mean to start up fuss, but
Yeah.
they, in fact, there's 2 acres of MU's grapes are planted 2.5 miles from my farm down by Mount Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
So did you have any problems getting started in the wine business? Was it with the first?
typical of any new business, and we still don't have a strong sales network. We're getting ready to take a new approach. Mr. McCoy, who was going to supervise that for me, had the misfortune of dying 3.5 years ago. And so we had to start out, and it's, I think our grapes are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're very good, and the wine is good, but it's a hard product to market, and it's developing a brand for an industry that's got several thousand different brands.
Right.
makes it challenging, but it's fun.
Yeah. So we've talked about mules.
Yeah.
We've talked about dairy cattle. Talked about beef cattle. Winemaking. Missouri's a top state, has been at certain times, top state in producing these things.
It's my understanding that Missouri was number 2 in wine production behind New York when Prohibition came. Of course, now California produces more wine than all the other states, and
Yeah.
the last I am aware of, I'm on the wine board up there, and I think the last figures I saw, we're now number 10, but we're moving a little bit.
Number 10, huh?
Yeah.
Do the grapes do well down at this area?
Yes.
Good soil? Plenty of
Good
sunshine?
soil, and I show my prejudice here, but the soil here has got more clay and different other chemicals. This Ozark Plateau area, I call it. We've got good footing as composed to the mud up around the river up north and that, but it creates a different taste, and that's one of the attractions of wine.
Mm-hmm.
Different people buy it because of that. So we developed some fine grapes here. There's a number of fine vineyards around.
Now, the last few years have been somewhat dry. Is it good for wine? Good for grapes to have
We
a
had
dry
our
year?
top production last year, but we irrigate.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, we irrigate. 2 years ago, for a period of 2 months, we had to irrigate every day. Last year, we didn't irrigate much.
Yeah, that was the summer of 2012, was the really hot,
Yeah.
dry summer.
Hot, dry summer, sure was.
Yeah.
It was primarily an agricultural county back then, plus the milk industry and the railroad industry. Railroads were big, particularly in Aurora. 2 of the main railroads went through Aurora. Monette, I think the railroads there, they had 2 railroads that went through Monette. And that was probably in Berry County, but there was a lot of train traffic, and that went through, and there was trains like out of Hoberg. Hoberg had a depot and several elevators and so forth. But that all disappeared when the grain moved to hay, and and et cetera. And as a cousin of mine in Hoberg says, the Missouri Pacific doesn't even honk when it goes through Hoberg. And they used to stop 3 times a day.
Yeah. How close was the railroad to your farm? Was it very close?
3 miles.
About 3 miles.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a question for you. Have you ever heard of a Waldensian Presbyterian church
I have.
down around Monette, south of Monette?
Yes, I have.
You know anything about it?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay.
I just, one of my uncles married a lady who was a Presbyterian, and that was east of Mount Vernon. It was Union Presbyterian. And through Aunt Ruby, why, a time or 2, she took us over there to picnics or something. I know I've been there, but I can't remember much about it.
Okay.
I was a kid at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think their settlement actually predates Monette. I think they were settled there before Monette was founded, and they go way back to southern France, I guess, is where the Waldensians originally came from, and then they moved over into northern Italy, and then they tried colonizing in South America, and then somebody had found out there was some good land, cheap land in Missouri, so they came into Missouri. I'm still learning about the Waldensians myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. The both Aurora which is in Lawrence County, and Monette, which is the residential part, and some businesses and that, and I believe the high school, not sure about that, were all located in Lawrence County, on the edge of Lawrence County. But the railroad, the two railroads that went through each town, were big factors in moving stuff through Missouri. And if you ever go through Aurora, I don't know how many grain silos are there. Yep, there must be 25 that are still standing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty indicative of the impact that farming had on the area.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever travel along Route 66 when you were getting started?
That's how we got to Springfield.
Route 66?
Route 66, and we came to Springfield when we were young. I was saying the grade school areas. We would come up here at least 3, maybe 4 times a year. It was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And to go to the biggest city.
Yeah. What you remember from those trips? Did you feel like you were on a big excursion?
Oh, it was always a big excursion. It was always fun with the signs along the road. That was one of the intriguing things. And 66, the people back then drove fast, even though it was a narrow road and there was a lot of traffic on it. So, of course, my brother and I enjoyed that.
Yeah. Now your brothers, you're the older of the 2 boys?
I'm the older of the 2 boys, and then there are 2 girls.
Okay. Are you the oldest child?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So went back to when you came into Springfield. Would you pack a lunch, or would you go eat at a restaurant, or?
No, we always got to eat at restaurants.
Yeah.
That was one of the big attractions, and trips up here were things like the Ozark Empire Fair was just starting, and occasionally we came up for a ball game that Mount Vernon played in.
Mm-hmm.
Different things like that. But there was 3 big dime stores on the square at that time. Woolworths, Kresge's, and can't think of the name of the other.
Third one.
And that, of course, was that and Sears Roebuck were headquarters for those farm folks from Lawrence County.
Yeah. So you come in. Would you wouldn't stay overnight? Would you just come in and go
just
back?
Come
Come
in and get back in time to milk.
Yeah. What do you remember about the Ozarks Empire Fair? Yeah.
Well, I don't remember specific things, but it always was intriguing, all the cattle and that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, when you're with Dad, why, you examined them thoroughly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was called Ozark Fair in those early days. This was toward the end of the 30s and that. But, and of course, I don't remember what the big acts were, but there was always the carnival, the Midway show. And that
Farm implement dealers, would they be showing off their wares? And
there were some of those, And one of the things I remembered, the old tradition in those days was that the eldest son of a German family got the farm, Mm-hmm. And I convinced my dad that I didn't want to farm. And so as a result of that, my final 2 years in high school, I spent a lot of time working for Uncle Walter. And in 1941, Lester Cox got the Ford tractor and some implement franchise for this area. And I think he was, and I later learned that he was in 6 states. He controlled a lot of 6 states. And Walter he and Walter got along very well, Uncle Walter. And so he had all of Lawrence County. And one of my big responsibilities originally was, and during the war, car dealers, tractor dealers and so forth would have lists. And a lot of them, you had to pay a fee, $250, $500 to get on the list. And Uncle Walter didn't do that. I got to maintain the list. You came in, and I got your name, your signature, how to get a hold of you, your address or your telephone number if you had one. Not everybody had a phone in those days. And then I got to when we always knew how many tractors were coming in. If we're going to get 4 or 3, I would call those people up and say, Tom, your tractor will be here in a month. Now, how many implements do you want? Walter didn't charge a signing fee, but he insisted you buy 2 implements to use with your tractor. And so it went very well. And I can remember when Mr. Cox lost the Ford, when they cut out dealers like him and did it directly. Well, I happened to be up here with my uncle and saw him. That was in the 50s, and he was not pleased.
Yeah. Well, so you spent some of the time during the last 2 years of high school helping out with the...
I was in the hardware store, which had the tractor store was right next to it, and and so I sold nails and registered tractors.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.